The twilight of the Council. The chamber of the Galactic Council was older than some member civilizations. Its vaulted ceiling shimmered with a projection of the galaxy. Every known world, every mapped hyperlane, every system under the Council's protection, or what had been under its protection. Now there were gaps. Sectors once lit with trade routes and station markers were black holes in the display, labeled only with a red glyph that meant lost. Chancellor Velkin stood at the central dais, tendrils curling inward in a gesture older than language. Our fleets are gone at Narshai, gone at Kethron, gone at Selvaris. The Harun Kal advance is unopposed. His voice was a rasp in the vast room. We will have no more core worlds to defend if this continues. The delegates murmured, their voices a soft hiss of languages overlapping. The Harun Kal were supposed to be extinct, a name in crumbling archives, a warning carved into stone on 100 worlds. Never reach as far as they did. But the warnings had not been enough. The first attack had come at Ular Prime, a black fleet that arrived without hyperspace signature, as if it had stepped between moments. The orbital ring was vaporized in the opening salvo. City shields folded under weapons that didn't just burn. They erased matter itself. By the end of the day, Ular's oceans boiled and its crust fractured. At each engagement since, the story was the same. No retreat, no prisoners, no survivors. Envoy Chazrael, her chitin ridges catching the cold light, leaned forward. We cannot hold the core. We need numbers, and the only place left to find them is the Rim. The word landed in the chamber like an insult. The Rim Band was a ragged sweep of half-civilized space, worlds with fractured governments, predator cultures, or economies built on raiding. The Council had always kept them at arm's length, quarantined by neglect. Velkin's tendrils twitched. They are violent, unstable. They may turn on us. Better they turn on us later, Chasrael said, than the Harun Kal turn on us tomorrow. And so the vote was taken. The Rimward Gambit had begun. Chapter 1. The Rimward Gamble. Earth was not supposed to matter. In the Council's endless files, Sol 3 was a Category 4 developmental, meaning it had no interstellar travel, unstable alliances, and a recorded history of large-scale planetary warfare. Exactly the kind of species the Council had vowed to avoid. But desperate civilizations take desperate measures. The Council's contact fleet arrived in Sol space without stealth, shimmering into existence just beyond the moon. The largest vessel, a spear-shaped command carrier 3 kilometers long, radiated power signatures that made every human military sensor spike into alarm red. In Washington, D.C., the Pentagon's Situation Room filled with the muffled thud of boots and the constant hum of scrambled comms. General Havers was already barking into a secure line. No, Mr. President, I don't think they're here to talk trade agreements. Above Earth, the Council envoy's transmission cut across every frequency. Military, civilian, even the narrow bands used for deep space probes. We are the Galactic Council. You will be armed. You will fight the Harun Kal, or you will be left to your fate. There was no hello, no introduction, only terms. Within 48 hours, 3 orbital shipyards began construction over Luna. The alien engineers worked with unnerving precision, ignoring human stares as they welded kilometer-long frames for ships whose schematics made Earth's best physicists look like children with toy blocks. Chapter 2. The Gift of Power. The technology transfer was like opening a fire hose into a teacup. Human scientists found themselves in labs alongside towering insectoid technicians from Carvelis, or floating, multi-eyed navigators from the Council's inner ring. Equations that would have taken decades to prove were handed over in crystalline data slabs. Captain Alara Voss was one of the first to step aboard a Council-built Freedom-class carrier. In the silent expanse of its hangar, she trailed her fingers along the cool alloy hull of a gunship still in assembly. "This could leapfrog us 5 centuries," her chief engineer murmured. "Or destroy us in 5 months," she replied. The Council wasn't just giving weapons. They were giving humanity choices. Faster-than-light drives, grav lances, shield harmonics. Tools that could unify a fractured planet or tear it apart before the Harun Kal ever arrived. In every briefing, the same warning was repeated. The Harun Kal will not negotiate. They will not leave survivors. And in whispered tones away from the translators, another thought spread among human commanders. What happens to Earth when the Harun Kal are gone? Chapter 3. the human factor. The Council engineers expected their weapons to be used exactly as designed. Meticulously calibrated grav lances, carefully balanced shield systems, fighter craft optimized for interception, not aggression. They did not expect human creativity. Within weeks, UEDC engineers were modifying everything they'd been given. The grav lances were overcharged until the barrels warped after 3 shots. But those 3 shots could punch clean through a Harun Kal heavy cruiser. Shield harmonics were reprogrammed to spike power at the exact microsecond of impact, burning out emitters in days, but doubling defensive output in the moment that mattered. The Freedom-class carriers were redesigned before the first was even finished. Hangar bays gutted and expanded to fit double the strike craft, even if it meant cramped crew quarters and stripping away non-essential safety systems. When the first Council inspector toured Luna Shipyard, he stopped dead in front of a human-built fighter bristling with oversized missile pods. "This violates every load balance protocol." "It works," replied Chief Engineer Ortega with a shrug. Even the Marines got in on it. The alien-designed exosuits, intended for boarding actions in vacuum, were retrofitted with magnetic recoil stabilizers, close-quarters plasma throwers, and hard-light bayonets. By the time the first combat readiness tests were run, Earth's fleets and infantry bore only a passing resemblance to the Council's neat, cautious designs. Some rim species like the Kellar watched with admiration. Others, especially the Tarkai, watched with envy. And in the core worlds, a whisper began to spread. Give humans a tool, and they will build a weapon. Chapter 4. The Tarkai. The first formal meeting with the Tarkai took place aboard the Council diplomatic cruiser Sarenvale. Admiral Sheridan Grant represented Earth, flanked by 2 Marines in modified exosuits that made the Tarkai guards twitch. The Tarkai warlord's scales were a deep iron gray, his eyes yellow slits that tracked every movement in the room. His opening words were a growl. "You smell like prey. We'll see if you can fight like predators." Officially, the Tarkai were there to discuss joint operations against the Harun Kal. Unofficially, they were probing for weaknesses. Within a week of that meeting, a human convoy bound for the asteroid colonies vanished. Wreckage was found later, shattered hull plates with Tarkai plasma scoring. 3 weeks later, the Tarkai announced the formation of a Rimward Axis, a coalition of predator cultures who saw the Harun Kal War as an opportunity to seize Council territory. Grant sent no reply, but his orders to the fleet were simple. If they fire first, they don't get a second shot. Chapter 5. Baptism in Fire. The Harun Kal struck the Sol system not at Earth but at Europa Station, the new deep space fuel hub that would allow Alliance fleets to range far beyond Jupiter. They appeared without warning. No warp signature, no detectable drive emissions, just black-spined cruisers emerging from nothingness. The station's defenses fired as soon as targeting locks registered, but the Harun Kal answered with beams of pale light that cut through the station's outer ring like a hot blade through ice. Marines in prototype exosuits fought room by room as the enemy breached. The suits had been intended for zero-G boarding. Now they were tested in narrow, frozen corridors, magnetic boots thudding on the deck as they advanced through smoke and flashing hazard lights. Sergeant Vale's squad fought in Docking Bay 4, using jury-rigged magnetic launchers to hurl overcharged plasma canisters at close range. One hit blew 2 Harun Kal warriors into fragments. Another detonated a fuel line that vented the bay into space. By the time reinforcements arrived, Europa Station was a twisted wreck, but it still stood. And in its battered control center, UEDC officers now had their first true data on how to kill Harun Kal ships. Chapter 6. Operation Iron Star, the Tarkai thought Earth would stay on the defensive, huddled around Sol, reactive, predictable. They were wrong. Operation Iron Star was the Unified Earth Defense Command's first deep space strike, planned in total secrecy. 4 Freedom-class carriers, 6 destroyers, and a squadron of stealth corvettes slipped into Tarkai space using a stolen Axis jump algorithm. Their target, Krathel Prime, the Tarkai's largest fleet yard, responsible for nearly a third of their warship production. Admiral Grant's briefing was blunt. "We don't hold ground. We smash everything that floats and burn everything that doesn't." The approach was silent, formation drifting among dark asteroids. In the hangar bays, Marines checked exosuit seals and mounted fresh thermal knives to their gauntlets. Pilots sat in cockpits, eyes closed, running mental checklists. At H-hour, the stealth corvettes opened fire. Precision railgun slugs that cored half-finished hulls in dry dock. Freedom-class strike wings launched seconds later, their drives painting long blue arcs as they dove into the yard's perimeter. The Tarkai defenders scrambled in disarray, half their crews still in dockside quarters. Destroyers pounded orbital stations until reactors overloaded, each explosion bright enough to cast shadows on Krathel Prime's surface. In under 30 minutes, the shipyard was gone. By the time Tarkai reinforcements arrived, the Alliance fleet was already in jump prep, leaving behind a drifting graveyard of molten hulls. Humanity had just announced it could take the fight anywhere. Chapter 7. The Kalar Accord. The Kalar were amphibious, their sleek bodies patterned with shifting bands of color that reflected mood and intent. They had been reluctant Council allies for centuries, their oceanic homeworld of Tashkar vulnerable to orbital bombardment. When the Harun Kal struck Tashkar, the Council promised reinforcements and sent none. 3 cities burned under orbital lances before the Kellar High clans realized help was not coming. The aid came from somewhere else entirely. Captain Alara Voss arrived aboard the corvette Endeavour, her holds packed with medical supplies and 2 marine companies. Human pilots flew combat air patrols over the Kalar capital domes, while alien engineers worked to reinforce their underwater shield generators. It was the first time the Kalar had seen humans fight, and they noted every detail: the improvisation under fire, the willingness to take hits to land decisive blows. Within weeks, the Kalar High clans signed the Kalar Accord, a binding mutual defense pact with Earth. The Rim Alliance was born, 2 worlds standing shoulder to shoulder against the Harun Kal and the Axis alike. Chapter 8. The First Rim Offensive. With the Kalar at their side, the Alliance moved fast. The First Rim Offensive had 3 objectives: drive the Tarkai out of human space, retake lost colonies, push deep enough into Axis territory to cripple their forward bases. The offensive began with Operation Silent Dagger, simultaneous stealth jumps into 6 Axis-held systems. Human and Kellar Marines dropped directly onto key facilities, securing landing zones for orbital strike teams. At Joran Belt, Admiral Grant used an old Earth trick, a feigned retreat. Tarkai fleets gave chase into an asteroid field seeded with grav mines. When the mines detonated, they tore entire Tarkai cruisers apart, tumbling debris into the path of their own retreating ships. The Rim Alliance retook 3 human colonies in 2 weeks. Freed civilians lined the streets of shattered cities, cheering Marines in battered armor. For the first time since Europa Station, the war map began to shift in humanity's favor. Chapter 9. Voss Nexus was a swirl of gravitational anomalies locked around a dying blue giant. More importantly, it was the single most valuable hyperspace junction in the quadrant, 8 gates linked to critical sectors. Whoever controlled it controlled the flow of reinforcements between the Harun Kal front and the Rim. All 3 major powers wanted it. All 3 arrived at nearly the same time. The Harun Kal came in first, 12 black-hulled cruisers and 3 dreadnoughts, bristling with pale lance cannons. The Tarkai dropped in second, 8 heavy warships and a screen of raiders, guns already hot. The Rim Alliance emerged last, their fleet fanning out into a crescent formation as Admiral Grant's voice cut across every channel. Let them chew on each other. We'll pick the bones clean. For 3 hours, Harun Kal and Tarkai fleets tore into each other, energy beams painting jagged lines through the void, capital ships colliding in desperate boarding actions. Then Grant gave the order. The Alliance carriers Freedom, Indomitable, and Kalar's Spear surged forward, launching 600 strike craft in overlapping waves. The first wave gutted the Harun Kal logistics line. The second wave disabled Tarkai communications frigates, blinding their formations. In the center of the chaos, a Harun Kal dreadnought, later identified as the Void Fang, refused to die. It rammed a Kalar cruiser in half, shrugged off 3 torpedo strikes, and kept firing. Grant's flagship Vanguard closed to point-blank range and unleashed a full broadside, 36 Gravlance beams in unison. The Void Fang finally went dark, drifting toward the giant star until it vanished in the corona. When the fighting ended, neither the Axis nor the Harunkal held the gates. Officially, neither did the Rim Alliance. Unofficially, everyone knew who controlled Vos Nexus now. Chapter 19, Boarding the Fortress Rings. On approach, the fortress stations looked like thorns punched through the night, black spires banded with weapon arrays that pulsed in a slow, lethal rhythm. The inner ring alone could kill a fleet. Grant wasn't planning to let it try. All assault units, green board, light the fires. Drop pods seeded the darkness, hundreds of streaking embers curving toward 3 target stations, Fort 2, Fort 3, and Fort 5. The pods hit with a dull, planet-sized thud the crew felt more than heard. Mag clamps seized. Cutting torches screamed circles into Harunkal hull alloy. The first breaches were chaos. Harunkal defenders moved like a single organism. No shouted orders, no visible signals, just a silent, deadly flow. Human squads fought room by room in half-G, every corridor a geometry problem solved at railgun muzzle velocity. Hard-light bayonets crashed against bone-white blades. Red blood and black blood beaded into drifting pearls. "Vale, we're pinned," Holt coughed, voice rattling through her suit as static and grit hissed over the channel. 2 squads, 80 meters north, kill box. "Break left on 3, Vale answered. 1, 2, 3. They didn't break left. They went straight, right into the Harunkal line. Vale's fire team hit like a thrown anvil, Grav's sling recoils hammering through his arms as overcharged slugs chewed armor at knife fight distance. Holt's squad popped smoke in half-G. The pale haze turned the corridor into a smear, and the Marines moved inside their own smoke like sharks, stabbing and dragging. Kilar shock troopers surged up the flanks, corded legs gripping bulkhead ribs, their tri-pronged harpoons thudding into Harunkal plate and yanking warriors off balance for human blades. A Kilar banner glyph, 3 crescents flashed green on everyone's HUD. Fort 3 reactor access achieved. On Fort 2, the reactor deck was a cathedral of heat, ribbed conduits, shimmering pressure halos, a thudding core wrapped in metallic lattice. Charges blinked blue along support struts, a ring of small suns waiting for permission. "Set," reported demolitions. 5-minute fuse. "Make it 4, Vale said. "We don't buy souvenirs." The Harunkal counterattack came like a tide, wall, ceiling, and floor spilling with white armor. Sanchez's voice cut through the feed, amused and calm in a way that made Holt grin despite herself. "Heads up, family reunion." He stood in the open with a squad automatic grav lance, braced behind a snap bulkhead door he'd flipped into a shield. Every third shot he popped the trigger to overcharge, the barrel groaning in protest. "We fight just to fight or to save someone in need," he said to the Kellar sergeant crouched beside him, almost conversationally. "And right now it's both." A Harunkal pushed through the beamwash, huge, scarred, plated with trophies. Sanchez dumped the pack into it until the core screamed, then drew his hard-light bayonet and finished the job the old way. One clean thrust under the jaw, a blade-bright halo in the half-G dusk. "Pen, sword, same family," he muttered, mostly for himself. "Charge is hot," Demolition said. 3 minutes. "Route," Vale snapped. The way out was vertical, an elevator shaft shorn to vacuum, 0G and wreckage. Marines kicked free one by one, bodies arrow straight, tethers flicking out to snag ribs and hurtle them onward. Holt drifted past a viewport. The Vanguard a battered, luminous whale beyond, guns still speaking in long, sustained beams. A Freedom-class carrier crossed the line of sight, trailing fire and pieces of itself and still launching strike craft as if nothing was wrong. On Fort 5, the fight devolved to sprint and smash. Kellar troopers planted shaped charges like breadcrumbs. Humans tripped them in sequence, turning pursuit into a meat grinder. A Tarkari Merc wing, those unreliable sharks, blundered into a defender ambush on a lateral causeway. For a heartbeat, Holt almost felt sorry. 2 minutes, demolitions, tight, clipped. "Smith, your tail end Charlie," Sanchez called. "Don't make me come back for you." "I would have been out first if everyone hadn't yelled the wrong answer," Smith shot back, and even gasping through a mask, he sounded like he was grinning. The final sprint was a blur. Bulkheads, bodies, the long vibrating hum of a station about to come apart. Everyone hit the outer hull in a ragged cluster. Extraction skiffs skimmed in hard, hatches yawned, hands dragged armor through like fish hauled over a boat rail. The charges went. Fort 2 lifted off its mounts in a corona of blue-white flame. The shock front rippled the inner ring like a drumhead. Fort 3's core failed sideways, its containment shattered in a glittering, lethal snowfall that ate anything it touched. Fort 5 sheared in half and rotated lazily, firing sporadically into nothing while automated systems died in the wrong order. Inner ring weapons down to 30%, CIC reported. Windows opening everywhere. Grant didn't wait. All ships through. The gap to the Heartspire was a wound carved in the night. The Alliance poured into it. Chapter 20. The Heartspire Ashes and Crowns. Up close, the Heartspire didn't look built. It looked grown. Black lattice, flowing planes, no right angles. Weapons were not mounted, they were organ. Every human on the assault team felt it, the wrongness, like a pressure behind the eyes. Rules of engagement, Grant said, voice flat. Kill the brain. 3 spearhead teams were assigned the core assault, Vales, Holtz, and a Kellar honor cadre. They docked under fire, hatches scoring, shields spitting, hulls ringing, and pushed into heat and dark. Inside, the air was dry as old parchment. The rooms whispered to themselves, faint shivers of energy running through the walls. The Haroon Call were waiting. The fight in the Heartspire didn't flow. It snapped. Knife-bright eruptions of motion, then stillness. The defenders moved in mirrored pairs. One engaged, the other already stepping into the next angle, anticipating where a human elbow or knee would be. Twice Holt blocked a blade only to meet a second weapon where her block would finish. Adapt, Sanchez said over the squad net. Think ugly. Ugly worked. They cut lighting to strobe, spiked atmosphere to thin, flooded the floor with foam from a ruptured coolant line. Haroon Call Grace faltered in the mess. Human brawling didn't care. They reached the command sanctum, a vaulted chamber supported by a single crystal lattice that shivered with a heartbeat not synced to the star outside. A figure stood at its base, larger armor, ridged like a crown grown out of bone. No translator tried to make sense of the sound it made. The meaning was the posture. You are too late. Line, Vale said. They gave the Supreme Commander a firing squad answer. Gravlances stitched its chest. Kalar harpoons pinned it to the lattice. Holt closed and fired a point-blank plasma bolt under the breastplate as every alarm in the room spiked to a migraine whine. The lattice fractured, not explosively, but like a dying song, notes separating, losing harmony, falling out of tune. Across the system, Haroon Call ships stuttered. Gunnery cycles lagged, shields blinked, formation cohesion, whatever eerie instinct bound them, frayed into noise. Fleet, this is Vanguard, Grant said. Calm again because someone had to be. Finish it. Outside, the Alliance didn't fight a battle, they harvested it. Kellar dreadnoughts fired spinal guns on a drumbeat. Human carriers emptied their racks and then flew resupply in open space with cargo doors peeled back and Marines passing warheads hand to hand. A core world battleship, their captain finally shedding ceremony like a bad coat, charged a crippled dreadnought and rammed it broadside, spilling both into the star's siphon field in a blaze that made sensor arrays weep. On the Heartspire, the floor trembled, the lattice collapsed in slow motion. Holt took one look at the collapsing geometry and didn't ask permission. Root now! They ran through a dying body. Doors jammed, they burned them. Corridors rotated like a Rubik's Cube. They shot anchors, repelled, and made their own paths. A Haroon Call warrior, half its face missing, still silent, lunged out of the smoke. Smith shouldered it into a bulkhead, and Sanchez stamped his hard light bayonet through the base of its skull. Told you I'd come back for you, he huffed. Extraction was an ugly miracle. Skiffs knifing through shrapnel, hulls ringing, Marines piling in a tangle. The last skiff cleared as the Heartspire folded in on itself. Not with a bang, but like a building whose center had been quietly stolen. The Haroon Call didn't retreat, they ended. Cut free from their mind, ships died where they stood. Crews fighting until ammo was gone, and then with whatever was left. Hours later, days by the way, fatigue warped time, the firing stopped. The star glared unblinking over a system of wreckage and drifting heat. They called it a victory because there wasn't a better word for what it cost. The Resolute was gone. Skyblade was a memorial of molten alloy in an ever-widening arc. The Vanguard limped, proud and scorched, with a list even in 0G. On a Ready Bay's cold deck, Sanchez passed a dented pen around to Holt, to Vale, to Smith. Nobody had anything profound to say. They didn't need to. 2 weeks later, the council convened. They expected parades. They got quiet. The Rim Alliance delegation, Human, Kellar, and half a dozen Rimward banners, walked in and stood without taking seats. Core delegates, robes pristine, launched into familiar lines. You are overstepping. These gates are under council control. You are armed to defend the galaxy, not to build a... Solus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You asked predators for help, he said. We helped. That debt is paid, with interest you could never afford. He glanced toward a gallery where a Kellar choir hummed an old ocean hymn for the fallen. From this day, liberated systems choose their own banners. We will defend the lanes. We will not return your chains. Someone shouted, treason. It sounded small. Grant spoke last, patched in from the vanguard, his dress white stained by grease he hadn't bothered to hide. Keep your titles, he said. We'll keep the gates. And just like that, the council wasn't the center of the galaxy anymore. They called the peace that followed a breather. It wasn't. It was a winded fighter, hands on knees, listening for the next bell. Shipyards in the Polar Adrift glowed night and day. Kellar domes sang names into water. A core world, quietly humbled, asked for an alliance garrison and didn't choke on the words. The Rim learned governance at the speed it had learned war, with mistakes, with grit, with arguments solved in councils instead of corridors. In a mess hall with bad coffee and good company, a Kellar commander slid onto a bench across from Sanchez. I still do not understand, Theric said, crest flicking in wry amusement. Why you laugh when you bleed? Why you play? Sanchez spun the pen between his fingers, flicked it to Theric, and nodded at Smith 2 tables over. Hey, Smith, what's that? Smith glanced up, already scowling. 3 Marines shouted before he could speak. Stylus, mini pry-bar, alien data spike. Smith, grinning now despite himself. Pen, you animals. Theric turned the pen over in his webbed fingers, smiling the way Kellar do, with the eyes. I see, he said. You fight to fight, and to save someone in need. Yeah, Sanchez said, easy, and because somebody has to hold the line till the next bell. Outside the viewport, tugs nudged a wounded carrier into dry dock. On the far side of the bay, a Kellar choir finished its hymn, and for a heartbeat the ship fell silent. Then the clatter resumed, wrenches, boots, laughter, work. The galaxy had a new center. Not a chamber, a gate, a line, a promise, and the Deathworld ascendancy held it.